So it is summer, it is hot. I mean, it's not really hot where I am in the UK right now, but in most places it's pretty warm right now in the Northern Hemisphere, and that does apply, of course, to the good old US of A. And now as NASCAR continues running around the US, and of course a quick detour to Mexico during this summer, you may be wondering how these drivers actually keep cool in their cockpits. After all, there is no air conditioning in their vehicles. They're of course strapped into these cars with full-on racing suits and helmets. It's a very hot and sweaty environment. Around some races in some of the hottest parts of the country, you may well see the thermometer top out at around 140 degrees Fahrenheit track temperature, which is of course unbelievably hot. So how do these NASCAR drivers actually stay cool? Well, one thing that does help them is the cooling vest, also known as the cool shirt. Now, we see this in a lot of motorsports around the world, but how did it get started in NASCAR? Well, the current urban myth is that Jimmie Johnson, the 7-time champion of the NASCAR Cup Series, started this. However, when he actually spoke about it, he said that Chad Knaus was the guy who was actually behind this idea. According to Johnson, his crew chief always had an eye on the new technology that was coming up through motorsport, as well as a holistic approach to performance, and that included Jimmie Johnson, of course. Johnson had to deal with cramping. Of course, when you are dehydrated on the edge of passing out, you will get muscle cramps, unfortunately, and the cool vest did help with this. Knaus had heard of the cool vest from Knaus had heard of the cooling vest from another sport and wanted to try it out in NASCAR, and it was very effective in actually helping Jimmie Johnson out. Johnson wanted to keep this new technology under wraps and wanted to prevent other teams from copying the idea and potentially gaining that advantage back. He started wearing it in 2018 and 19, but only his teammates knew of the innovation. But eventually the secret was out, and most drivers started to wear this cool vest during hot races. Joey Logano has described the cool vest as, quote, "It's like jumping in a pool on a hot summer day. It feels great. It's awesome." And you know what? I bet it does feel very relieving. But you're probably wondering how it actually works. Well, the simplest way to describe it is basically a t-shirt with a cooling technology, and the shirt houses tubes for which cold fluids run through, and it has revolutionized driver comfort as a result. Basically, having the actual fluid running around prevents it from getting too hot and staying cool. Best way to kind of imagine that is this fluid is actually moving around, or whatever is actually there is moving around all the time, then it will of course not get as hot. For example, if you leave your car outside on a hot day and it's parked up, even if that car is white, it will very much get incredibly hot by the time you start driving it. However, if you start driving it around, you'll notice by the end of your drive, yeah, the car will still be hot, but not as hot as it was when it was stationary. And it's similar with the cooling vest, really, when it comes to this. Before this, the likes of Eric Jones has explained that they used to actually have ice packs in their race suits and used to throw them out and put new ones in during pit stops. But of course, that is rather cumbersome and not as effective as the cool vest. And these days, they also use things like the helmet hose, the little oxygen pipe that they have in case of a fiery accident. That is actually used to pump cool air in as well to help the drivers stay cool in hot conditions. I mean, it's hard enough walking around places like Florida and Phoenix and Texas and places like that in the summer in just a t-shirt and shorts. Can you imagine these guys doing it in racing suits and overalls? It must be incredibly difficult. And these cooling shirts were actually really needed for this next-gen car. Apparently, they are a lot hotter in the cockpit than the previous generations of cars. Of course, they are a lot faster, they're a lot better through the corners, but they do have the downside, unfortunately, of being a lot hotter in the cockpit than previous cars. So having this cooling vest in place for all the drivers for pretty much a few years now has actually been a real godsend. But that doesn't stop people doing some relatively odd things to try and keep cool. In fact, Shane Van Gisbergen, an SVG, apparently freezes his t-shirt before going out for a race. And to be fair, I can sympathise with that. On a very hot day, I do often put some of my bed sheets or a blanket in the freezer before going to bed to keep it cooler. It doesn't really work, doesn't make a big difference, I will be honest, but I try. It makes at least a little bit of difference. There you go, guys. The cooling shirt, the cooling vest, whatever you want to call it, it's very much been a revolutionary thing in NASCAR, and the fact that it's come in at a time when we've got these new regulations, these new next-gen cars, has been a real benefit. Can you imagine how difficult it would have been without it? We could have been in a situation, potentially, where some Cup Series drivers were passing out in the car while racing, which I don't even have to tell you how dangerous that would be. But yeah, did you know about this, guys? Did you know what a big difference it made? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, comment, subscribe as always, and we'll see you very soon for much more content on the world of motorsport just like this.